All right, crew. So we're through the first three chapters of The Great Divorce, and you'll notice we're about to fall into kind of a rhythm, which is nice. Pretty much for the rest of the text, each chapter is a new character. Each character is faced with the choice of staying in the Highlands or going back to the Grey Town. And I put up the diagram that I want us to continue referring back to, because again, my premise here is that I really don't think C.S. Lewis is meaning to say that we can choose after death to go back and forth between heaven and hell. Okay, what I think he's saying is that this is Earth. Earth is in the twilight, and that's why the high countries and the gray town are both in the twilight. And some of us as believers are living in a twilight that will fade to morning, that will fade to heaven eventually. And some of us as non believers are living in a twilight that will eventually fade into night. And currently living in that twilight, either one, we have the choice of where we want to go. So that's us on Earth. We're ghosts and solids bumping shoulders with each other. And there's a really good, I think it's a good depiction of this on page 25, the third sentence down. It says, or actually, we'll just read the first three. As the solid people came nearer still, I noticed that they were moving with order and determination as though each of them had marked his man. So in the high countries, you have these solid people going after the ghosts and saying, hey, I'm going to try and convince you to stay. And that's essentially what evangelism is. I'm going to try and convince you to stay in the high countries and to not go back and live as a ghost in the twilight. So we meet the big man in chapter 4. He's a relatively simple character, but I also think he's pretty pertinent to maybe a lot of us, maybe a lot of people you know, etc. So here's kind of the character chart that I'll build and some things that I think are worth noticing. So you can add to yours if you had it, or you can maybe you had some things I didn't notice. I don't know. But one of the main characteristics I saw was that he is a law-abiding citizen. He's a law-abiding citizen, and he meets his friend named Lynn, and he is shocked to see Lynn there. He's like, "Wait a second, Lynn, you killed Jack. Why are you in the high countries and I'm in the gray town? I'm a good person. You're a murderer. You killed someone. How are you here? I always did my job. I was an upright citizen." And on page 27, he says, I never asked for anything that wasn't mine by rights. If I wanted a drink, I paid for it. And if I took my wages, I done my job. So his perspective is that he's shocked to see his friend there. And he's shocked that he's not there because he says, well, I was a good person my whole life. I did my job. I just want my rights. That's the tagline I use for the big man because he keeps coming back to that. I just want what's coming to me. I want what's mine. I just want my rights. Another thing about him is he's very proud. He refuses to accept anything that might even look like charity. And on page 28, he says, I'm not accepting anybody's bleeding charity. So he's trying to stay in the high countries, and his friend Lynn, we'll get to this, his friend Lynn is saying, well, you're not going to earn your way here. You can't just ask for your rights, because if you ask for your rights, this is the great irony with the big man. If you ask for your rights, you're getting your rights. You're being in hell. That's where you deserve to be. And so he says, well, I'm not going to ask for anybody's charity. I just want what's mine. He's extremely proud. If he didn't earn it, he doesn't want it. And there's a lot of people like that, right? I sense even some of that in a lot of you guys, right? I sense it in myself at times. I sense it in friends and family. Just this perspective of there's a certain pride in working and earning something, and you don't want to accept something that's given as a gift. And so for him, that's one of his leading characteristics. He doesn't want to accept anybody's charity. He also has a heightened sense of justice, which is what we see right at the beginning where he says, wait a second, you don't belong here, Lynn. You killed somebody. I belong here because I've earned it. So he's this really heightened sense of what is right and what is wrong, and what Lynn did was wrong. Therefore, Lynn should have been sent to the gray country, and he, the big man, should have been sent to the highlands. His desires are really simple. He wants his rights. So if the tussle-headed poet from chapter 2 wanted appreciation and recognition, the big man is relatively simple as well. He says, I'm asking for nothing but my rights. Just give me what I've earned. And that's really the crux of the conversation that we see between the big man and Len. So I kind of summarized their main points here, and hopefully you were annotating quotes that exemplified this. But the big man starts and basically says, I want my rights. I was a good person. I did my duty. I worked hard. I paid my bills. I was like Paris from Leaf by Niggle, right? I was a benefit to the community. And Lynn's response is, trust me, no, you don't. You don't want your rights. Because the irony, big man, is that you deserve hell just like all of us. Your rights are the last thing you want. And he even says, I'm not getting my rights. If you look on page 28, it's about the third paragraph down. He says, I haven't got my rights or I should not be here. That's what Lynn's saying. Lynn's like, I'm a murderer. I killed someone. Believe me, I'm not getting my rights by being in this heaven, in the high countries. You will not get yours either. You'll get something far better. Never fear. So the big man keeps saying, I just want what's mine. And Lynn's saying, no, you don't. Because if I got what's mine, I'd be in hell too, or I'd be in the gray town too. You don't want your rights. You want something far better than that. But it's a gift. It's charity. The big man says, you shouldn't be here. You killed a man. And Lynn's response is, amen to that. Right? I definitely should not be here. It reminds me of the thief on the cross in Matthew, where he says, Father, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Because he realizes, I should not come into your kingdom, God. And Lynn exemplifies that really well. The big man says, this isn't fair. And Lynn says, hey, no, it's not. Absolutely, it's not fair. I should not be here at all. I was a horrible person. But I asked for something that was given. I asked for grace, right? And that's implied, doesn't say it specifically. The big man says, aren't you ashamed of yourself? Like, look at you, right? He's disgusted. He's like, look at you, Lynn. You killed Jack. You killed Jack. How can you even live with yourself? How do you look at yourself? And there's a great, really beautiful quote on page 27, third paragraph down. He says, Lynn says, I do not look at myself. I have given up myself. And so he says, you know what, big man, you're exactly right. You know what, big man? I am ashamed of myself, but I don't look at myself anymore. I look at someone else. I look at someone else who is so much greater than me. I have completely given up myself in order to be here. And then C.S. Lewis, this is a little bit lost on us because we're not British, but you hear people, I have a horrible British accent, so I'm going to try, but it's really bad. The big man on page 28 says, I'm not asking for, I can't even do it. He says, I'm not asking for anybody's bleeding charity, right? I'm not asking for anybody's bleeding charity, right? And so he says bleeding like it's this British thing. Probably was Irish, Australian. I don't know what I just did. But Lynn makes it into a pun, and I love it. It's beautiful. He says, the big man saying, I'm not asking for your bloody charity. And Lynn says, do at once. Ask for the bleeding charity, which is a direct picture of Christ on the cross. He says, I don't want your bloody charity, or I don't want any bloody charity. And Lynn says, no, you do. You want the bleeding charity. That's the only thing that'll get you here. And he says, everything is here for the asking, but nothing can be bought. You can't buy your way to heaven. You can't earn your way to heaven. You don't want your rights. What you want, playing off of that British phrase, is you want the bloody charity. And that's just a great line. It's something I've always it's always stuck with me as I continue to read through this book. Christ's work on the cross as the bleeding charity, or the bloody charity, to use the British term. So we got two characters so far. We got the tussle-headed poet. We got the big man. The tussle-headed poet looking for appreciation and recognition. The big man who just wants his rights. And at the end, it's sad, but at the end, the big man decides he's going back. And so the question that is on all of our minds a little bit is, why would you ever choose the gray town? If you could choose to live in a twilight that will fade into morning, that will become day, why would you ever choose to go back to hell? And the big man gives us this answer. He chooses to go back to hell because he doesn't want to give up his rights. He wants what he has earned, and he refuses to give up his pride and to say, I need some help, right? I need the bloody charity. And it's a great depiction of faith. It's a great depiction of faith. And so I want to begin to create a theme list. You can do it maybe on the back cover or somewhere. But the big man exemplifies the theme that to stay in the high countries, requires a giving up of self. It requires a complete giving up of yourself, because you don't want your rights. You want charity. You absolutely want charity. And at times that can be confusing. And on page 26, it reminded me a lot of the things we talked about with the princess and the goblin. On the very last line of page 26, Lynn says, it's a little hard to understand at first why you're in the gray town and I'm in the high countries. But it is all over now. You will be pleased about it presently. Till then, there is no need to bother about it. And it's very similar to what the grandmother says to Princess Irene. He essentially says, don't worry about all the ins and outs, but just understand that in order for you to stay, you're going to have to ask for the bloody charity. To stay requires a giving up of self. And so that's really what we see with the big man. We see a character who wants his rights and has to come to realize that, in fact, that's not what's best for him or for all of us.